Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista. Welcome to our tropical weather outlook video for today, June 24th, 2024. We have some things to go over to today, including an area of interest that you could see on the title card by the National Hurricane Center. We now have a new area of interest to watch in the southwestern Caribbean and into the Gulf and into the southern Gulf heading into the end of the week. We talked about this for the last several days. We saw it coming on the ensembles and on some of the longer range GFS, so I don't think this is too much of a surprise. But obviously, maybe to some people it is. But no, regardless, we have a new area of interest to watch in the Atlantic, and it should potentially keep us busy in terms of eyeing the tropics straight into July, not only with this, but with potentially other areas too. But we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Let's get started though today, once again, going over that National Hurricane Center area. It is a 20% chance right now over the next 7 days. There's a 0% chance over the next 48 hours by the National Hurricane Center, because you could see, especially denoted by this very, very long arrow, but the National Hurricane Center only expects this to really get going in the Western Caribbean and Southwestern Gulf of Mexico. But obviously, they are noting the precursor right now, which is a tropical wave that is still east of the Caribbean islands. But as it moves into the Caribbean, it'll really be an interest of how amplified, because it is a strong amplified tropical wave that we're watching. Otherwise, this really wouldn't be much of a concern. But the biggest thing is how amplified does this wave stay as it traverses to the Caribbean and as it gets to the Western Caribbean, where things are going to be more in its favor. So let's take a look at a satellite shot of the Atlantic, and there you can see the tropical wave that is marked by the NHC. You can see there's decent amount of convective activity with it. You should have seen it yesterday though, because yesterday evening I looked at the satellite and there was quite a bit of convection. It was really one beefy tropical wave that was out here in the Atlantic. And this is our precursor to what we're going to watch once again as it gets into the Western Caribbean and potentially Southern Gulf of Mexico. It's really interesting so far how many of our formations or many of our attempts this year, even though we're only still into June, the attempts that we've gotten really have been throughout the Western Caribbean and Southern Gulf. Maybe that's a precursor for later on in the season. We'll see. But it looks like once again it'll be another window opening up for that area to potentially see some development to occur. It is climatology, at least by climatology, it is favored. After all, we tend to look at the Western Caribbean and the Bay of Campeche, Southern Gulf for our developments that usually occur in June. So it's not too surprising in that aspect that this is where we're really watching things. And just to really quickly go over the sort of energy of this tropical wave, you can see on the 850 millibar vorticity product, a really neat vorticity product to see kind of how we stand in terms of energy, especially associated with these small systems like this tropical wave. And you could see there's actually quite a bit of decent vorticity with it. There's some orange shadings in there, so there's definitely some sort of consolidated, well, not fully consolidated, but you get what I generally mean. There's a pocket of energy associated with this wave. It is a very strong tropical wave. The main idea, though, is how amplified does this vorticity remain as it moves into the Caribbean, but also how north enough is it able to move, so maybe it doesn't end up crashing potentially into Central America too, and that's also another aspect of it. But regardless, I will say that for one thing, at least if we take a look at the sea surface temperatures, very nice and toasty throughout the entire Caribbean. I'm using CDAS plots by Tropical Tidbits today, just so it kind of gives us, because this is a chart that actually gives us a wide shot of the entire Western Atlantic, and you can see 29s, 28s, 30s, so mid to upper 80s all throughout the entire Caribbean. So there's plenty of ample energy and heat content stored in the ocean for anything that does try to become of this system. Although I think the main focus should be really in the Caribbean and Southern Gulf, where we see really lots of consistent 29s and 30s degrees Celsius in markings across this area. It's actually consistent throughout the entire Caribbean, but you get what I generally mean. The heat is there, and that is definitely a plus working in favor of this system. But as I did mention before, it's really going to come down to one, how amplified this wave stays. Obviously, how quickly it moves too, because there's generally lots of Saharan air. Let me really quickly bring back this shot. And I have a Levi Cowan tweet that kind of breaks down everything. But really quickly, just to mention, we have this wave here, but we also have dry air to the north of it. So it's also going to depend how quickly it's able to move into the Caribbean. So it stays away from the dry air too. And then obviously you could see more tropical waves moving off of Africa. That part, though, kind of goes into the idea of generally watching things further in the deep tropics besides this wave as we head into the month of July, which we'll go over in just a moment. But back to the wave that we're watching right now. Dr. Levi Cowan really lays it out nicely in this tweet, I think. He mentions obviously the tropical wave quickly approaching the Windward Islands, which will track through the Caribbean this week. And this is, I think, the biggest thing that will probably work to its detriment in terms of it potentially not developing. He mentions that a strong ridge to the north could guide the wave into Central America before it has a chance to develop. But he also mentions that if an upper trough over the southeast Gulf of Mexico causes the wave to slow down and potentially nudge north too, so this would mean instead of being suppressed over Central America, it might be a little bit further north enough that it's still over the Caribbean, or it potentially just crosses into the Yucatan, that it's still decently into the southern Gulf of Mexico enough that it could develop. And he mentions that because of that there's a chance obviously to generate sustained deep convection too. That's generally what I was saying. There's also a chance for development prior to reaching the Yucatan Peninsula region as well. And the GFS and European ensembles have been highlighting this risk. And as I mentioned earlier on in the video, this has been something, once again, we've been seeing on the models for at least the last several days now, since we've had 93 and 92L to worry about. We've been kind of monitoring this, but he does mention, and I think it's very important to point out too, but it remains a low probability signal for now, but it is something to keep an eye on, though. Nothing is set in stone with this, but it is still something to watch, and this is really quickly a visual sort of image that Levi Cowan gives us of what he's saying. Very strong general ridge in the northern Gulf, potentially keeping this suppressed to the south, but he does also outline where this upper trough is too, and if that is amplified enough, if it could nudge this wave just a little bit north, that it'll give it a little bit of a better chance to develop into the Caribbean. So now that we have that to kind of keep in mind, to kind of try to put the pieces together, if you're just trying to find the right words, but put the pieces together with what the information has been given to us by these people to look at in the models. Let's take that over to what the current GFS model run is right now. And I actually think this is the same model run on the 12Z GFS. Yeah, it is, that Levi Cowan shows. And let's just really quickly take a look at it for ourselves. You could see over the next 24 hours, the next 2 days, Caribbean wave, very fast moving, moves over the Windward Islands and then moves into the Caribbean. And then as we get towards the next 3 days, you can see on the model run, this is kind of highlighting the situation if we would get a stronger ridge that suppresses this wave a little bit further to the south. And you could kind of see that play out here. Hour 120, you can see where all the vorticity is, not really concentrated much in the Caribbean, and a lot of it is really a lot more over Central America. And then you can kind of see that as we get into the Bay of Campeche. Does try to see some development that occurs, at least on the GFS. You could see maybe if this has some sort of more latitude, that's the right word, latitude, enough, it might try to develop, but obviously it fails to do so. And then over the next 7 days, we're now into July, and this wave is seemingly already inland over Mexico, and obviously didn't have a chance to develop because of the ridging being strong on this run. Let's actually really quickly, though, to kind of give an idea of what to look at in terms of if we were to see this wave probably have a better chance to develop. And I think the best run is to bring the 12Z run from yesterday. And you could see that there's definitely a much more noticeable difference. Notice where all the vorticity is. This is the 12Z run from yesterday, by the way. notice all of the vorticity is a lot more concentrated near the Yucatan Peninsula instead of near or over Central America, and kind of just staying suppressed close to all the Central American landmass that we have. And then it kind of consolidates a little bit as it heads into the Yucatan, and then you could see into the Bay of Campeche. Notice it does have a little bit more time that it actually does try to consolidate this time on the GFS run, and then we kind of see that move in to Mexico over the next several days. And this is actually hour 222, so that means, I guess, as well, that if this is not as suppressed over the Yucatan, it might mean that as it gets to the Caribbean too, and the general Western Caribbean, Yucatan, Bay of Campeche area, it might generally move slower, and I guess that's what gives it a better chance to develop anyways. See how you can put the pieces together? It's all very fascinating, honestly. And then 12Z run yesterday from the GFS, but this also kind of highlights the other part that I want to talk about as well. If we go to the 12Z today, yeah, obviously it doesn't show up. But you can see the other part of what I want to talk about is these waves out here in the general Atlantic, not just the Western Atlantic and into the Caribbean, but as we generally move into the month of July, we obviously focus on this wave that could potentially try to get its act going near the Western Caribbean, but then there's also potentially subsignals. If you look at it in the MDR, and this is kind of getting to the 10-day mark, but you could see some of these waves do amplify enough. At least the GFS has this wave amplifying quite a bit, but it obviously doesn't amplify enough that it becomes a tropical system. But then by day 10, it kind of seems like it's something over the MDR. But you could see generally as we head into the month of July, we start seeing more pieces of energy that do try to consolidate some in the MDR, and that's generally a part of signals that the models have been showing of things trying to get going out further east in the Atlantic a little bit more as we head into the month of July. So maybe if this wave that we have by the that we're watching right now, or at least what I was trying to say, it's mentioned by the National Hurricane Center now, if maybe this wave doesn't develop, maybe we might get another chance with one of these other waves that maybe they could, at least per some models, develop in the MDR, maybe in the Eastern Caribbean or near that general area. In fact, let's actually see what the Euro shows. This is the 0Z European. Let's see what they show. Not much happening, although you could actually see on the 0Z European, you could actually see as well, they show a little bit of amplified energy moving near the Caribbean islands. So you generally get what I mean. Waves might become more amplified as we head into July. That might give them a little bit better of a chance, of course, especially if they're able to battle the trades, because one thing I will point out, this time of year, the tropical Atlantic trades are really strong, and that honestly beats out everything else. Dry air, even the sea surface temperatures, especially this year that they're warm, they're not much of a concern. And even dry air sometimes is not the biggest concern. It really is sometimes the very fast trades across the general deep tropics and the Caribbean, which sometimes leads to the detriment of some of these tropical waves that do try to develop, but are unable to. And that, I think, will be the biggest thing we need to watch, is how amplified are these waves enough that they're able to fight the trades and potentially develop and become probably short-lived, but still some sort of tropical system that we get to form out of the deep tropics of the MDR. It's all things that we got to watch as we head into July and as we close out June, and definitely over the next several weeks, it'll keep us busy in the tropics department. I mean, to be expected, given that this year is supposedly going to be a very active hurricane season, so none of this should come as a shock to anybody. But obviously, it is still up in the air, whether or not. Sorry, sometimes I get my words a little confused. Very tired, but we're trying to make it through. We're almost done anyways. I was gonna wrap it up now anyways. But really quickly before I go, final thought. We're really got to watch to see how these waves pan out. Maybe we'll see this Caribbean wave develop. Maybe it won't. Nothing is set in stone, but the signals are generally there. And once again, it'll definitely keep us busy as we head into the month of July and close out the month of June. There we go. Now I finally got my last thought out. Hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, I always encourage you to like, comment, subscribe, share with family and friends. Comment your thoughts as well. What do you think about what's about to happen? Or if you have any other questions too, I'll try to answer them for you as quick as possible. Have a great day, a blessed day as always. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. And we will talk again tomorrow.